Well, hello there, and welcome to my kitchen table, a place in most homes where we can sit and talk for hours with family and friends, putting the world to rights, as my dad would say. Let's see where we're off to. This small, attractive town has been an important centre since the 7th century. Situated a few miles north of Stirling, the town is believed to have been founded in 602 by a Celtic missionary, St. Blaine. It developed into a major stronghold of the Reformation Church, whose power was symbolised in the magnificent 13th century cathedral. The building fell into disrepair, although restoration work carried out a century ago has now returned it to its Gothic splendour. My English teacher in school once said, "Write what you know." What she actually meant was, read the book before you do the book report. Oh, come on, I can't be the only one, you know, who tried writing a book report without reading the book. Huh? I didn't know the victims or the families in this story, but I know that tears were shed and hearts were broken across the world when this story came to light. So, Miss Hargreaves, I feel I know this case. I've read everything there is to read about it, and I've written the facts as I know them, and I'm now going to read them out loud, which is something I never did in school. If you're ready, take a seat as I tell you a very distressing story. The small Scottish town of Dunblane was racked with grief and horror on March 13th, 1996, as details emerged of the killer that had lived in their midst, who shot 16 small children and their teacher during his devastating slaughter in a primary school gym. Thomas Hamilton, 43 years old, turned one of his four guns on himself after killing or injuring all but one of the class of 28 5 and 6 year olds at Dunblane Primary School near Stirling. 15 children and their teacher, Mrs. Mayer, died at the scene. Another child died in hospital. It's not known how many bullets were discharged during the massacre, which the police estimated to have lasted less than 5 minutes. Only one child escaped unscathed. Luckily, two of the pupils were absent due to illness that day. The motive for the Dunblane Massacre has never been established. Thomas Hamilton had become an assistant scout leader at the age of 20, but soon came under suspicion because of his behaviour towards boys. After further complaints, he was required to leave the Boy Scouts, which, totally pissed him off. Hamilton repeatedly asked to be allowed to return, but to no avail. And he wrote letters to various government authorities claiming persecution. In the meantime, he became an avid gun collector, and he organised several boys' clubs in which he taught shooting, gymnastics, and a few different sports. Though his clubs were initially popular and well attended, his reportedly strange behaviour, as well as his apparently paedophilic activities, eventually alienated club members and their parents, and the clubs closed. Some reports also indicate that Hamilton had been turned down for a volunteer position at Dunblane Primary School. Would you believe the tennis star Andy Murray was a student at Dunblane when the massacre occurred? And he later said that he'd attended Hamilton's boys' clubs as a child. On the day of the massacre, Hamilton drove into the school car park, or parking lot, at about 9:30 in the morning. He'd previously asked a child what time assembly was being held, and he'd been told the wrong time of 9:30 instead of 9 o'clock, which was actually a blessing in disguise, because only minutes before he arrived, the hall, or the gym, was full of around 700 children and staff for morning assembly. When he arrived, he cut the cables on a telephone pole using pliers from his van, and then entered the school carrying 4 handguns and 743 rounds of ammunition, wearing goggles and shooting earmuffs. He fired a couple of shots as he made his way to the school gym, where teacher Gwen Taylor had just taken her 28 Primary 1 students for their physical education class. They were 5 and 6 years old. Hamilton entered the gym and immediately opened fire, wounding physical education teacher Eileen Harold and teaching assistant Mary Blake, and injuring and killing several children. Harold and Blake took shelter inside a cupboard in the gym, taking as many children with them as they could, as Hamilton continued his barrage of bullets. When an adult and an older student tried to look inside the gym to find out what was going on, Hamilton fired towards them and then left the gym, firing toward the library cloakroom and into a mobile classroom where the students lay on the floor at their teacher's instruction. Hamilton then returned to the gym, dropped the gun he had been using, and chose another one, which he used to kill himself by putting it in his mouth and pulling the trigger. The entire attack took place over a period of less than 5 minutes. Mrs. Mayer and 15 children were killed outright, and one other child died in hospital. A further 15 people, the vast majority of them children, were wounded. At 9:41 a.m, Headmaster Ronald Taylor made the first call to police after being alerted by Assistant Headmistress Agnes Olson of the incident. She claimed to have heard screaming from the building, while Mr. Taylor had assumed it was from the builders on the site. He went to investigate and arrived after the shooting had ended, before rushing back to his office to get Deputy Headmistress Fiona Eddington to call ambulances at 9:43 a.m. 5 minutes later, the accident and emergency ward at Stirling Royal Infirmary were informed of the incident and prepared for multiple casualties. At 9:57, the first ambulance arrived in response to the 999 call, while a medical team from Dunblane Health Centre arrived at 10:04. Staff from centres in Doon and Callander also attended the scene to deal with those who were injured. Medical teams from Stirling Royal Infirmary arrived at 10:15, while more staff came at 10:35, having travelled from Falkirk and District Royal Infirmary. At 11:10 a.m, all the injured victims were taken to Stirling Royal Infirmary. However, one died en route to the hospital. In the hours after Hamilton walked into the school, concerned parents rushed to collect their children. The media descended on the town, and the world struggled to come to terms with what had happened. Meanwhile, the injured who did survive were transferred to the hospital in Falkirk and the Royal Hospital for Sick Children in Glasgow. At 11:15 a.m., Chief Constable Willie Wilson made the first public announcement, confirming 13 children were dead, with several others in hospital. Later that day, at 1:45, Superintendent Louise Munn announced the number of fatalities had risen to 16 children and 2 adults, one being the gunman. It took several more hours for the parents of the children to be informed what had happened. The head teacher, Ronald Taylor, was described by police as a hero for the work he put in to calm the distraught pupils of the 700-strong school. Jack Beattie, a senior consultant paediatrician who arrived with the medical team, said it was the worst carnage he had witnessed in his 19 years as a doctor. He said, "We saw a large number of dead and injured children when we arrived in the gymnasium." He said there were a number of teachers comforting the children who were still alive, and ambulance staff who had arrived before us. The children were very quiet. They were in shock, both because of their injuries and the psychological shock. The governor at the school, Jerry McDermott, said he had comforted a distressed teacher, Stuart McCombie, who had rushed to the gymnasium after the shooting. He said, "Stuart told me they were looking up at him with their wee eyes, slowly changing colour as the blood drained from their faces, and they died in his arms. The room was just awash with blood." Stephen Hopper, aged 11, was in his classroom yards away from the gym, which shortly before had been full of morning assembly. "It was right next to my classroom," he said. "I looked over and saw the gunman. He was coming towards me, so I just dived under my desk when he turned and fired at us. It was pretty scary when he started firing at our classroom window because all the glass smashed and I got hit by a piece." As the news reached the town, parents congregated at the school gates. The children were handed back to them in small groups, but the parents of the victims were led to a private room. Nora Doherty, governor at the school, said, "I found out it was not my daughters. I felt relieved, and then I felt guilty because I felt relieved." A father outside the school gates cried, "I don't know if my girls are alive or dead. What kind of a maniac does this? They are babies in there." Janet Aiken, a mother of an 11-year-old pupil, said, I have my son, but many don't. When I saw Campbell, I just wanted to weep, but many parents aren't having a reunion with their children." The Dunblane Massacre continues to be the worst ever school shooting in the UK. As Queen Elizabeth II, the Prime Minister, and the leader of the opposition registered their shock and distress at the worst multiple murder this country had ever seen, there were immediate calls for greater security in schools and tightening of the laws on gun ownership, which had last been addressed after the Hungerford Massacre in 1987. In the aftermath, residents of Dunblane initiated the Snowdrop campaign, named after the spring flower that was in bloom at the time of the mass shooting, to see changes in British gun laws. The campaign's petition gathered some 750,000 signatures, and a letter written by a mother of one of the slain children, which was printed in 2 national newspapers. In February 1997, Parliament responded by passing a law banning private ownership of handguns above a .22 calibre. And in November of 1997, the ban was extended to all handguns. In addition, security requirements for gun clubs were expanded. Following the passage of those laws, the incidence of gun killings in the UK dropped significantly. Gwen Mayer was a 45-year-old Scottish primary school teacher. She was the mother of two daughters, Esther and Debbie, and the wife of Rodney Mayer. They lived a happy life in the sleepy town of Dunblane. She taught Primary 1 at Dunblane Primary School in 1996 and had 28 pupils in her class on that day. Gwen died trying to save her pupils from Hamilton's evil attack. The little ones who gained their wings were Abigail McClellan, 5 years old; Victoria Clydesdale, 5 years old; Sophie North, 5 years old; Ross Irwin, 5 years old; Faree McBeath, 5 years old; Melissa Curry, 5 years old; Megan Turner, 5 years old; Kevin Hassel, 5 years old; John Petrie, 5 years old; Joanna Ross, 5 years old; Hannah Scott, 5 years old; Emma Crozier, 5 years old; Emily Morton, 5 years old; David Kerr, 5 years old; Charlotte Dunn, 5 years old; and Brett McKinnon, 6 years old. Fly high, little angels, and may you continue to rest in peace. Thank you so much for allowing me to tell you this harrowing story, and thank you so much for listening. If you found it interesting, please do the usual, hit the like button, subscribe. It's free to do, so don't hold back. And please remember, nothing is more important than a smile that has struggled through tears. I've been Sue, TTFN.